If you're a fan of Radiata stories, today is an exciting day for you. Thanks to a Reddit user by the name of jamesgerrick, we now have over 2 hours of never-before-seen Radiata stories content. James actually data mined the game back at the end of 2020, but I just came across it today while I was on the Radiata stories subreddit. So first off, James, as a fan, thank you so much. I am over the moon. I am beyond excited to jump into some of the stuff that you found and start breaking it down. In this video, I won't be going over any of the hidden gameplay elements that were found, but rather I'll just be talking about the new story content and cutscenes. After watching the 2-ish hours of cutscenes, I would say probably 90 minutes of it is brand new stuff that we've never seen before. And then the remaining 45 minutes are cutscenes that we have seen before, but they're actually shot in different angles, and sometimes there's actually completely different dialogue in some of the scenes. Because there's so much to go through, I'm not going to break down every single scene, so I'm going to actually leave a link in the description to the full video so you can watch it in its entirety. I'll also leave a link to the Reddit post so that you can see all the other neat gameplay stuff and hidden items, and there's a debug room. There's all sorts of neat things that were found in the data mine, so I'll leave a link to all that stuff in the video description. But what I will be doing is going through some of the new scenes that really stuck out to me and just sharing kind of what happened and my thoughts on them as well. Okay, so first scene I want to talk about, Human Path. One thing that you'll notice when you go and watch the video is that none of the new cutscenes are things that happen prior to the split. It's all things that happen after the split, so that's most of the new content. So in the Human Path scene, normally Jack goes to the castle to meet with all the guild leaders and larks to talk about the dragon. That is pretty similar, but one thing that you'll notice is that the leader of the Vareth Institute, the owl, actually attends instead of sitting Curtis in his place. One thing that you'll also probably notice is that Lucian in this scene tries to act as more of a mediator, and instead of pushing to attack the dragons, he actually pushes for mediation and tries to find a peaceful resolution. After the meeting, Larks pulls Jack to the side, and one thing that you'll notice about Larks in this scene is he's way more cold and cutthroat, and basically orders Jack to go get Ridley and bring her back, and that if he doesn't bring her back, that he's going to either send out a brigade or bounty hunters to kill her. And as this conversation is going on, Cross can be seen outside of the door eavesdropping, and what's interesting about this is he gets jealous. In the original story, it always seemed to me like Cross didn't really care about Ridley much at all, but in this version of events, it seems like he cares about her a little bit more, but only slightly. Moving on to the next scene, after Jack leaves the castle, he actually runs into Gantz on the bridge above his apartment. They have a bit of a back and forth, and Jack basically just kind of wants to know what the deal is with their dads. And Gantz kind of beats around the bush. He's like, maybe my dad killed your dad, maybe he didn't, I'm not really sure. One thing I do really appreciate about this scene though, is I feel like in the original game on the Human Path, Jack never really had a conversation where he just learned for sure that Gawain killed his dad, but he was so angry at him at their first meeting, and I always thought it was kind of weird how he just knew that he was responsible, but we the viewer never got to see that conversation. After the scene wraps up, we also get to see a little bit of kind of the journey of Natalie and Leonard as they go to try to rescue Ridley. So it's kind of cool to see some of their interactions and their perspective on the situation. The next thing that I want to touch on is that in this version of events, these alternate cutscenes, Genius and actually a lot of the other side characters have a much more prominent role in the story. So while Jack is wandering around the castle, he has this really kind of funny encounter with some of the kids that live in the castle, where they're like, this scary man is chasing us, and it turns out to be Genius, and then, Jack does his usual kind of teasing and calls Genius weird, and it's just kind of nice to see this development of their relationship, because I felt like we got introduced to Genius early in the story, but never really saw much more of him after that. In this scene, Genius also kind of establishes his role as the person that fills in the non-human information that you wouldn't get normally in the human storyline, which I think is cool. So Jack learns about the Hap living inside of Ridley, he learns more about the dragons, he learns a lot more about the lore from Genius in this scene, and I kind of can't help but wonder why this was removed. So Jack actually bumps into Genius while he's at the castle with Parsec. That scene is pretty similar where, he shows up, funny money for the second time, and he shows him around. Only this time, instead of them both leaving the castle at different times, Jack and Parsec leave the castle together. Because of Jack's relationship with Parsec, where he's helped him out twice, Parsec kind of has a soft spot for him, and he kind of gives Jack one last opportunity to come to the non-human side and come be with Ridley. And I wonder if maybe the developers were going to use this scene as an opportunity for players to change their path midway through, but it's not really clear. As Jack is about to leave town with Parsec, they actually get ambushed by some castle soldiers, because just like in the original story, Lucian tells Dionysus that, hey, that's the fire dragon and you need to hunt him down. We also get treated to one of my favorite scenes in this whole 2 hours, is where Lucian is looking in the window, and in his reflection you can see the silver dragon, which I thought was so cool because in the original game you don't see the silver dragon till the very end of the game, and I like that we got this little tease earlier on in the story. Because of the interference from Lucian, Parsec is forced to transform. Jack realizes that he's the fire dragon, so obviously he doesn't want to go with him anymore and decides to stay with the humans. We then go back to an update on Leonard and Natalie, and they're kind of doing recon. And what's cool about this scene is it seems like the non-humans have extended their reach way further than just Fort Halencia like they did in the original game, and they've occupied, I think it's Tria Village, which is a small town outside of the kingdom. The next scene, though, is just so wild to me. So we have the character of Morgan, the witch lady that you have to pay a ton of money to recruit, and she's actually meeting with one of the Dark Elves, Coco, to give him medicine for the Algendar's plague. This scene is so wild for a bunch of reasons. One being that there's a cure for Algendar's, which I feel like could have totally eliminated so much of the conflict between the humans and non-humans, and so why that was never brought up. Maybe because it would have just been too convenient, I'm not sure, but also the fact that there's this human who's secretly meeting with the non-humans. Then also she's the one that tells Coco that, hey, the gold dragon needs a vessel to come back to life, and if the non-humans want to win the war, they're gonna need the gold dragon on their side. Which seems odd because you would think, why is a human helping the non-humans? Who is Morgan really? What is her role? Why does she know so much? And why is it in the original game she plays such a background character, but here in these cutscenes it seems like she had such a bigger role in the story? Then there's this scene with Jack and Ridley that paints Jack in a totally different light. I don't know if in the original game plan that over the course of the human path he was supposed to become really cold-hearted and really mean, but that is on full display here. He's ultra dismissive of Ridley. He takes pride in the fact that he killed dragons and almost kind of boasts about it and teases her about the fact that he did it. Then when Ridley starts talking about the cosmic order and Earth, Jack just kind of blows it off as a bunch of superstition and tells her to leave. But right as Ridley's about to leave, she says, you know, I just wanted to share my last words with you. And Jack is like, whoa, last words, what's going on? And so he follows her out as she's trying to leave. And he comes upon a scene where Gawain is squaring off with Natalie and Leonard. In the original version of events, Ridley and Gawain were there at nighttime and they were just keeping a low profile. But this time it seems like they got caught, and so Gawain, he takes out Natalie and Leonard in just one strike, and then him and Ridley leave. After the stuff with Ridley is wrapped up and Jack kind of gets back into the rhythm of, doing quests for the guild and all that good stuff, he gets visited by Genius. Now, in the original game, there's a quest that you do for Vancouver where someone's complaining about noise in the sewers, and then you find out that it's Genius, and he's located this kind of secret tomb area that has these old paintings in it, and that's kind of really one of the only other times you interact with Genius in the original story. In this scene, Genius actually explains that he was only able to find that secret room with the help of some other people. And it turns out that those other people are Rinka and Flau, aka Gantz's new best friends. And I really enjoy the direction that the story goes here, because Rinka and Flau want to meet with Jack because they need his help with Gantz. So Gantz was sneaking around the castle because he was trying to dig up information on what happened with the Blood Orc situation at the beginning of the game. And if you've played through the game, you already know that Cross is behind it, but I like that Gantz does his own detective work and that's how he finds out the information. But Gantz being Gantz and not being the stealthiest person ever, he gets caught while he's inside the castle and gets captured and put inside the dungeon. And because of everything that's going on with the war, there is no time for a trial, and Gantz gets sentenced to execution and he's going to be put to death tomorrow. And so Jack and Rinka and Flau come up with this plan to rescue him, and so there's like this whole jailbreak sequence where Jack tries to go in to save him, but it of course doesn't go as planned and it doesn't turn out smooth. And right as Jack is about to get Gantz out of the dungeon, they get surprised by Cross. Cross is super upset about Jack's whole claim to fame with killing the dragons, and so he actually wants to use his opportunity to kill Jack and kill Gantz and just be done with them both. But before he can get the chance, Dinas actually interrupts the whole thing because there's an alarm going off because the castle is being attacked by a dragon. Everybody calls for a temporary truce and they go to confront the dragon. And this scene is so cool because it totally caught me by surprise. The gold dragon shows up and squares off with the group. In the original story, just like the silver dragon, probably even more so, we never see the gold dragon really do anything. And so to actually see the gold dragon in action was just so awesome. The gold dragon gets the better of the group and is about to go in for a death blow on Jack. It's like actually gonna bite Jack's head off, but stops right before it makes contact because it recognizes Jack, and then Jack recognizes that it's Ridley. But before they can have their beautiful touching moment, Cross interrupts it with a sneak attack. It doesn't kill the gold dragon, just more so irritates it. The gold dragon hits Cross, knocks him unconscious, and then flies away. That's when Genius and Lark show up, and Genius explains that the silver dragon is actually Lucian, and he's just broken out of the castle, and now they gotta get that situation under control. And as if things weren't crazy enough, as they're talking on the bridge, Zane and some elves show up. And I was expecting this scene to just break out into a fight like right then and there, but Zane just kind of monologues for a bit, then he makes a declaration that they're going to settle this fight between the humans and non-humans at the City of White Knights, which is the final location for the game. Zane also drops like a really cool little bit of lore in this conversation, where he mentions the dragons, and it turns out that when the rotation happens between the silver and the gold dragon, that not all humans die, obviously, because some of them still go on to exist, but the dragon kills 90% of all mankind, and only 10% is allowed to stay behind. And so that kind of explains why, even though Radiata is such a small town and there's so few people that inhabit it, why they have so much power, because only the most powerful human beings get to live on from generation to generation after each one of these rotations. That pretty much wraps up all of the new content for the human path. There is one last scene where Jack and Cross, they kind of square off and have their final duel. Jack wins, obviously, and unlike the original game where Cross gets killed by a dragon, he gets beaten by Jack, and then Jack just proceeds forward to the ending of the game. Then we switch over to the new non-human content, and the first scene I want to talk about is really the first scene of this storyline, and that's right after Jack makes the choice to leave with Ridley. One thing I really enjoy about this scene is you get to see more of their like playful banter, and it's not as like dramatic and serious as it was maybe in the original game, and I just really enjoyed the more casual feel of it. I also appreciated how in this version of events, Jack doesn't even hesitate when Ridley's like, I'm gonna leave. He's like, okay, cool, I'll come with you, I'm gonna pack a bag. And that's so, I feel like, on brand for him, that he would just act first and think later. And right as they're leaving, Ridley wastes no time telling Jack like, hey, I'm struggling with this like double spirit thing I got going on, and sometimes I black out, and sometimes, you know, I just feel really strange. And I appreciated that she didn't try to keep it a secret from him in this kind of version of events. She just comes right out with it so that he knows what's going on with her, so he's not as confused when she's like having these weird spells or rolling around on the ground later on in the story. They also play a lot more into the whole Ridley having an elf spirit inside of her thing, because when they get to the City of Flowers, she doesn't immediately get taken hostage, but rather they're like, hey, what's up? And they call her Hap because, you know, that's the elf inside of her, and they just let her walk right in. There's no, hey, you gotta take over the fort before we can talk to her thing. Jack just waits outside and sits while she goes inside, and she meets with Zane, and it's a smooth, very easy just transition, which I thought was a very stark contrast from the original story. I'm not sure which one I prefer more, but it was really cool kind of seeing the two different takes. As Ridley and Zane are meeting, one of the elves comes into the room and is like, hey, Fort Halencia has less guards than usual. This would be a great time for us to attack it. And so that's kind of how they segue into the whole fort sequence. There did seem to be like a bit of video missing because it kind of jumps to Jack just being inside the fort, and for some reason he's alone and he goes heads up with Leonard and Natalie just like he does in the original game. And just like in the original, Jack wins, makes Natalie grovel, all that fun stuff, and then her reinforcements arrive. But what's different about this is as Jack's running away from the fort, he makes it way further than he does in the original. He makes it all the way out to Tria Village, and then he gets surrounded by Natalie's entire brigade. And right as things are looking dicey for our boy Jack, Ridley comes in clutch with the whole elf group, and they save the day. One thing that I noticed as I watched through these cutscenes is it seems like in this alternate version of events that Ridley was written to have a much larger role in sort of the major combat sequences of the game. After they take over Fort Halencia, there's this really interesting scene where we see Larks meeting with Gantz, and it seems like Larks has kind of run out of options about what to do with Jack and Ridley and their whole situation, and so he's reached out to Gantz. Even though Gantz has been discharged from the Knights, it seems like Larks is kind of dangling a carrot in front of him like, hey, if you hunt these two down and you either kill them or bring them back, I will let you back into the Knights. There's also this really small scene that kind of caught my eye. It's basically just Gawain, and he's training the non-human forces for the fight against the humans, and there wasn't anything spectacular that happened. I just thought it was really cool to kind of see that behind the scenes of what they're doing in between all the conflict. And the last scene that I want to touch on is this scene between Ridley and Jack, and I'm not sure if this scene was meant to supplement or if it was meant to replace the scene of the two of them under the resin tree. But I really enjoy this scene, especially the start of it, because I feel like it's not stiff and it plays into their sort of natural banter and dynamic, because it opens with Jack coming up behind Ridley and he tries to scare her. She doesn't get scared because she knows that he's there, and she catches him early and ruins the surprise. And then she just very sweetly kind of asks Jack to come and walk with her, and they go on this short walk, and then they stop and they talk, and then she kind of tells him about how she's reached her destiny and all this stuff, and then it kind of ramps up the seriousness a bit. But those first couple of seconds I just really enjoyed. I'm not sure that I prefer it over the original resin tree scene, but I think that these two scenes could work well together in sort of an overarching story. And then this all wraps up with Jack and Zane both escorting Ridley to the Gold Dragon Castle at the end of the world. And that's pretty much it. That's where it ends in terms of the new content that we got out of this data mine. There was some really cool stuff in here. Again, I only touched on a little bit of it. I encourage you, watch the full 2-hour-long video. If you're a big Radiata Stories fan, it'll fly by, and it's just been so long since we've gotten any new content that this was such a welcome surprise. And the fact that this is all coming out right around the 16th anniversary of Radiata Stories is just so cool and such perfect timing. So I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you enjoyed checking in. I hope that you enjoyed my breakdown of some of the scenes, and hopefully I piqued your curiosity and you're going to go check out the full video. But before you go, please check out our petition on change.org. It would mean so much to me. We've been trying for over a year to have Radiata Stories added to next-gen consoles. There's no telling what might happen. We could see a remake, we might see, a definitive edition where they add in these extra scenes and maybe they're fully voiced. There's no telling. But none of that stuff will happen if we don't have enough support. So please check out that petition. Give it a signature if you really feel it in your heart. Tell your friends about it. It would mean so much to me. But either way, I thank you so much for coming and watching this video, and I hope you have a great and wonderful day.